climate finance webinar in terms of how can we let's find out more about carbon market finance to support delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals. So people are just coming out of the waiting room. This is, today we're having a conversation, so you're not getting any PowerPoint slides. We're going to have some great experts and practical advice for you. And you will have a chance to ask your questions, so do put your questions into the chat as you think of them. My name is Sue Riddlestone. I'm one of the co-founders of Catalyst 2030, which is a network of social entrepreneurs who want to work together to accelerate progress to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have around 200 social enterprises in the network, and I particularly have been working on climate because that's what I do in my day job, sustainability solutions, and also working with the UN and governments. You're very welcome to join. If you haven't already joined Catalyst 2030, you can go to the webpage and find out more about at least getting the newsletter and joining in. It's a great network. So this session will be recorded, just so you know. And today we're going to have a conversation about carbon market finance to deliver the SDGs. We have some great speakers. Miguel Naranjo from the UNCCC, so the UN Framework on Climate Change, and there was a word I missed in the middle there. And he's going to share the very sort of theory and approach of the UNCCC to carbon finance. And then we're going to hear from Geoffrey Furber of Ripple Africa, who's going to tell us as a social entrepreneur how he has used Access Climate Finance to support his work in Africa. And David Parejo, who's also a member of Catalyst 2030, who brought us all together because he's been working with Miguel and has also been using climate finance more in the renewable energy sphere. So I think between our speakers, you'll get a good picture. So if we listen to them telling their stories and their information, and if you can hold on to your questions and clarifications until they've all spoken for about 10 minutes, then after about half an hour, then we can have a wider conversation with all of us. So first of all, I'll hand over, and Yvonne is here to help us with any technical issues. So if you have any technical issues, please speak to her on the chat. Okay, excellent. So Miguel, oh, we've already got some good questions here. Very good. So Miguel, over to you. If you could lead us through telling us all about climate finance from the point of view of the UNFCCC.
Thank you, Sue. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. As Sue said very briefly, my name is Miguel, and I work for the UN Climate Change Secretariat, or the UNFCCC Secretariat. So it's a lot of C's, Sue. It's normal to forget one of them. And basically, the main role that the UNFCCC Secretariat has is to support national governments in the negotiations around climate and help them follow up with the agreements that they reach, most recently, most importantly, the Paris Agreement. However, they have also asked us more and more to interact with other stakeholders. So not only national governments, but also subnationals and private sector, academia, NGOs, civil society in general, to promote, facilitate as much as possible, and give recognition to those that are acting on climate. And I myself, I'm based in, or I'm part of the team that is doing this, engaging all these other stakeholders beyond national governments. And so that's where I'm coming from. I lead an initiative that is called Climate Neutral Now, that I will give you a little bit more information about in a second. Maybe just to get started, I always like to say at the very beginning what the United Nations is, simply because people are familiar with the name UN, United Nations, but few really understand what it is or how it works and its relevant background. So the United Nations was born after World War II, basically to avoid World War III. The mandate that the UN, or that created the UN, was to help maintain peace and promote human rights, right? However, as governments, and we were established by governments, right? We are an intergovernmental organization. Our bosses are governments. Whatever we do or whatever we don't do, it's based on what our bosses, national governments, tell us. Now, when governments started working within the United Nations umbrella to try to maintain peace and promote human rights, they quickly realized without protecting the environment, we are not really going to be able to feed people. Without, with hungry people, we are not going to have peace. So the system of the United Nations started growing, and you have an environment agency, and you have a food and agriculture organization, and you have a child rights, and now you have 68 different UN organizations that deal with all kinds of topics, because it is clear that all of those topics are interrelated. And I'm sure that you as social entrepreneurs and colleagues working in this area are perfectly familiar with that. All issues are interrelated. And that's why you have now a UN system dealing with all kinds of issues. What is important is to understand that the UN system is, again, an umbrella. It's a safe space where governments can come together to try to find solutions on behalf of their nations, on behalf of you, to the common challenges that we all face, be it climate change in our case or something else. So in that sense, also the United Nations is there to serve you. And the United Nations system serves national governments, and national governments are supposed to represent and serve you. So you are part of the UN. We are working in principle for everyone. Good. So with that background, climate change. Climate change, SDG 13 is the one closest to our heart here in the Climate Change Secretariat, obviously. We are having this session to focus on carbon market finance, carbon market mechanisms, and how they could support the work that you do. And we'll hear from Geoffrey after me on a practical case around this. But let me give you the boring introduction, the theory, but I hope it won't be that boring. Let me give you the background around how this works in general. So within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, there is one piece of work or one tool of the convention that is called the Kyoto Protocol. And the Kyoto Protocol established carbon market mechanisms in principle as a way to allow developed countries who have a target to reduce their emissions meet a little part of that target by purchasing carbon credits that would come from developing countries, which did not have a target to reduce. And in exchange, developing countries were getting sustainable development benefits from these projects, from the projects that generate the carbon credits. So it was in principle a win-win situation. For developed countries, it was a cheaper way to meet part of their commitment. For developing countries, it was attracting investment to support their sustainable development. Now, this is within the umbrella of the Kyoto Protocol. So we are talking government to government. But there is also carbon markets, which is called voluntary carbon markets, where you have all other kinds of players as well. Individuals and organizations of all kinds can get involved in the voluntary side of the carbon markets. And the logic is the same. The carbon market mechanism, the system that allows you to produce or to develop a project that will produce carbon credits that you can sell, is just a tool to help mobilize additional finance to make the projects possible. One of the key elements of carbon market projects is that they must be what is called additional, meaning they are not business as usual. So if you're going to build a solar power park simply because it makes financial sense, because it's feasible to do it, then that project cannot generate carbon credits. It cannot get carbon credits because it's business as usual. It's going to happen anyway because it's profitable. But if the project is not profitable, but thanks to the income from selling the carbon credits in the market, it goes beyond the limit, the mark, to make it feasible, then it is additional. Then thanks to the carbon markets, it's becoming possible. There are a whole set of methodologies or approaches to try to demonstrate that projects are additional or not. But we can go into all the details that you want about how that is done. But for now, maybe suffice to say that there are approaches and methodologies to try to demonstrate that the projects are additional. And when they are additional, those can get carbon credits. So not any solar power park, not any wind power park or tree planting project can get carbon credits. You first have to demonstrate that it is additional, that it really represents an extra effort to reduce, to avoid, or to capture greenhouse gas emissions. And now you also have, in addition to this tool to demonstrate that the project is additional, you have a whole set of methodologies and procedures that tells you how to implement these projects. So if you're going to plant trees, you cannot do it in any way that you wish. You have to follow an approved methodology for planting trees. And there may be several methodologies, there actually are several methodologies depending on which trees or where you're going to plant them. Is it reforestation? Is it afforestation? Is it protecting existing forest? Depending on the situation, you need a different methodology and you need to follow it. And you will need to demonstrate that you have met all the requirements of these projects and the methodology requirements. Once you have gone through the whole process of implementing the project and you have been able to demonstrate that the project met all of those requirements, then you get your carbon credits that you can sell in the market. This is in general how it works. Why do people buy carbon credits? This is the other side of the equation. Someone is producing them, someone is buying them. In the government, at the government level again, within the Kyoto Protocol, now soon, hopefully, under the Paris Agreement, there are arrangements or provisions for governments to be able to sell and buy carbon credits. But on the voluntary market, the main reason why organizations buy these credits is to compensate or offset emissions associated to their operations. Individuals, you and me, can also use them to offset a flight or some other source of emissions. So the main use of these carbon credits has been for individuals and especially for organizations to claim that they are offsetting their emissions, that they are carbon neutral or climate neutral or net zero. There are many definitions out there these days with no agreement on what exactly each means. It's an ongoing discussion. But in any case, it's for you to compensate your emissions. Now, in the end, what we use the carbon credits for is not important. One can even buy carbon credits just for the purpose of supporting a project without needing to claim I'm offsetting my emissions. The idea is the whole mechanism, the whole concept of the carbon markets is to mobilize investment from the private sector and from other stakeholders into emission reduction projects, and projects that, in addition to reducing, avoiding, or capturing emissions, also bring sustainable development, other sustainable development benefits, environmental and social benefits. Just to give you an example, if you're an IT company and you are asked to invest in supporting Geoffrey's project in Africa, you know, the IT company might say, why? It's not part of my business. It's not going to generate shareholder value. It's not my expertise. Why should I get involved in that? So there is little incentive, let's say, for investment. But when you tell them, actually, you're going to get some carbon credits and you're going to be able to claim that you're offsetting your emissions, therefore you are responding in some way to your responsibility with climate and with society. Okay, then there is a rationale for them to invest in Geoffrey's project. And that is the general background behind why offsetting and why carbon market mechanisms. So just to summarize how this could support you, and again, Geoffrey will refer to you to a practical example. Again, if you have ideas for projects, for activities that may reduce, avoid, or capture greenhouse gases, then the first thing that you have to do is to look at the methodologies that exist for the type of project that you are thinking about. Review if you can meet the requirements of those methodologies. Some of them, by the way, can be quite complex, so you may want to talk to someone with a little bit more practice, like Geoffrey, or Geoffrey's colleagues who actually deal more with the technical side, I think. And then make a decision if you're ready to really invest in it. Generating carbon credits or using carbon credits, offsetting, has been many times criticized as an easy solution, a quick fix, right? I travel somewhere and then I buy some carbon credits and I clear my conscience. Right? I have offset my emissions, I can feel good again. But it's not that easy. It's like buying a car. You can go right now to your favorite dealer, and if you have the money, you buy a brand new car and you drive away in it. Very easy, right? But behind producing that car, there are thousands of people who put a lot of work in designing it, in building it, in taking it to the place where you could finally buy it. It's the same with the carbon credits. Behind the generation of the carbon credit, there has been the work of a lot of people for a long time to generate those carbon credits, and Geoffrey will not let me lie. So when you come and you buy these carbon credits, for you it's very easy as the final user to do it, but behind it there has been a whole process. So if you want to generate carbon credits as a way to bring additional source of finance for projects that you may have, you're going to have also to invest in understanding how the markets work, how the methodologies work, what are the requirements that you need to meet, and dedicate some time and some money also to make it happen. So we're happy to provide also guidance on how to do this, of course. Now I'll leave it there as an introduction. Of course, we can expand. Only two more things I wanted to share with you before handing over to Geoffrey, because I'm taking very long, is we have an initiative that is called Climate Neutral Now, where organizations are invited to estimate their carbon footprint, try to reduce it through their own action, and finally compensate the rest, totally or partially, with carbon credits. So it's a way to build or to give recognition to organizations that do these three steps, and also bring support to projects like Geoffrey's. Any organization can participate, any organization can promote it. So we're always happy to collaborate, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here right now. Thanks to collaboration with David. So we have this initiative, everybody's invited. If you want to learn more, contact me. And the last thing, we also have an awards program that is independent of Climate Neutral Now, independent of carbon credits. It's an awards program for projects that are innovative and scalable to address climate problems, either to reduce emissions or to adapt to the changes in climate. So since you are already involved in the social entrepreneurship community, if you have valuable projects that you think deserve recognition and have a climate component, of course, please apply to this to see if we can help you give more visibility to your project. It's called Momentum for Change Awards. Good, I leave it there. And I think now to go from the theory to the practice, I hand over to Geoff.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Just briefly, my name is Geoffrey Furber, and 17 years ago, my wife and I started a charity. And we now have a cook stove project in Malawi, But I think if I give you a bit of background of how it all started, it basically all started because we were traveling in Malawi and we took a wrong turning. And we ended up at a backpackers lodge, and we stayed there for one night and found it was for sale. To cut a long story short, we bought the property. It's a lovely place right on Lake Malawi. And I thought, well, what are we going to do now we've bought this? And one of the things I'd always rather fancied was to help the local people in Africa. And so we started the charity, Ripple Africa. And we first started with healthcare projects and education projects. But my real passion lay with the environment. And I've traveled a lot in Africa, and you see so much deforestation, so many things that are happening in Africa which are destroying the environment. And so I thought, well, let's plant some trees. So in fact, one trip when I traveled to our place, we found that a fisherman had cut down a huge tree just near our property, and it was just for firewood, basically. And I was rather incensed by this, so I thought we must do something. So we got some people together, and in the first year, I think we planted 50,000 trees. And we thought, this is great. And we got the chiefs round, and they looked at it all, and it was very popular. And the chiefs all recognized there was a problem because trees were disappearing, and they didn't really know what to do about it, but they loved the idea of planting new trees. So we did this. This developed, and last year, for example, we grew 3 million trees. So it's something that's definitely wanted by the communities out there. We also realized that while we were planting these little tiny trees, people were cutting down large areas of the forest, mainly clearing it so that they could farm. I thought this is really quite a big problem. So we got into forest conservation. And what we really do is we empower communities so that they can look after their forest areas. That then led on to fish conservation, because the fish that are all disappearing. To give you an idea, in Malawi, like many countries in Africa, when I was born, there were 3 million people, and today we've got 20 million people, and it's growing at 3% a year. And that's having a terrible effect on all resources. Anyway, going back to trees and woodland and so on, I realized that not only were people cutting down trees for clearing land for farming, it was also firewood for cooking was a major problem. And everywhere you go, you see these women, nearly always women, not very few men, nearly always women, carrying big bundles of wood on their head. And I thought, well, hang on. Here we are planting all these trees. Perhaps we should be looking at how they're using their cooking fires. And you go into the villages, and everybody's using what they call a 3-stone fire, which is literally three bricks or 3 rocks with firewood at each side, and very, very inefficient. They get through a huge amount of wood, but also very dangerous because they produce a lot of smoke. I think smoke inhalation from these cooking fires kills more people in the world than malaria. So that was a problem. And also you see lots of people, lots of children particularly, with burns on their legs. As they walk around, the children all are in the kitchen and they run around, they tip over a big 20-litre pot of boiling water, and you've got terrible burns. So I thought, well, we ought to do something about this. So we started finding out about fuel-efficient cook stoves. And there was a German organization, GTZ, at the time. This was probably about 10 years ago, I would think, we started. And they developed a cook stove, which looks a bit like a terracotta flower pot with a hole in the side. And this was a fuel-efficient cook stove. And they were helping people get teams of about 20, 30 women to make these, and then they would then sell them to the local community. Now, people loved them. They were fuel efficient. They used a lot less wood, and it was a great idea, but people didn't like buying them, and the women weren't terribly good at selling them. And I thought, well, there must be an easier way to make this. And each one, incidentally, took about a day to make, and then it had to be fired in an oven. So it was quite a long process. And I thought, well, I always like to have very simple solutions. So I did a bit of research on YouTube and found a cook stove which was made out of bricks. It's a rocket stove, which is like a sort of L-shaped stove, if you like. And this seemed a very easy thing to do in Malawi, because lots of people make bricks. So we made some examples and put them in people's kitchens, and went back to see how the women were getting on. They said, we love these because they use a lot less wood, but is it possible I can have another one? So we then made a double cook stove, so that the women can cook nsima, or a sort of maize porridge or cassava porridge, and a relish, which could be tomatoes and fish or cabbages or whatever. And so we made this, we developed our cook stove called the Changu Moto, which literally translates into fast, fast fire. Well, this cook stove has proved to be very popular. So we started getting people to try these, and I think we made about 1,000 or 2,000 of these, and went back and saw how everybody was getting on. And then I thought, this is a great idea. But when we went back to some of the houses, we found that people weren't using them, or they'd actually decided that they'd go back to the old 3-stone fire. And I quickly realized that actually, in order to change people's mindsets and change people's habits, it takes a long time. So you can't just provide the cook stove and that's the end of it. And I'd sort of heard about carbon offsets, and I never really understood them. And it was all very technical for me. I'm very good at all the stuff on the ground, but not very good at all the technical stuff. So I at that time found an organization called Sigma Global, who were very conveniently based in Sydney, Australia, which was many miles from where I am in the UK and many miles from Malawi. But they were very helpful, and they really bought into our project. And so they do all the clever stuff and do all the paperwork and so on that works with the United Nations, UNFCCC, I think it is. And then we do all the actual work in Malawi. And in essence, the idea I thought was, if we could get carbon offsets or carbon credits, we could sell these, and that would provide an income. And that income would then finance the actual project, so that rather than it just being where we supply the cook stove, we can actually supply the cook stove and then keep going back to make sure people are using them and then using them correctly and so on. And this was for a 10-year period. And not only that, I thought, if we can make sufficient extra money, that can also go back into the charity. And my passion has not really been about making money. You know, yes, it'd be very nice to make some money, but the most important thing is that it funds the project, and that it provided money for the charity for the other projects that we're doing. Because it's incredibly difficult, as you can appreciate, for the charity to raise money, and especially now with COVID-19, it's even more difficult. So if that could provide a regular income to the charity, so we can put it into our tree planting, our cook stove projects, we've got a sweet potato project, we've got education projects and so on. And then you're actually benefiting all of the people in the community. And we've worked in our area now for 17 years. So people realize that we're not there just for a 2-year project and we go away and leave it, like most aid. We're there for the long haul. And this cook stove project has certainly been one where we've been there for the long haul, and it's been really, really appreciated. So the cook stove project we have has 40,000 cook stoves. And just to sort of put it in layman's terms, because we talk about carbon, tons of carbon and things, but what is a ton of carbon? It's very difficult to visualize. So we try and break it down into a simple way. So when you have a 3-stone fire, for example, if you can imagine these bundles of wood that women collect, I mean, normally they're about 1.20 meters long, and it's about as wide as that. And they carry these on their head. They get through normally 3 of those bundles every week just to do the cooking. Well, with the Changu Moto fuel efficient cook stove, they use only 1. So for every cook stove now, we're saving 2 bundles of wood every week. So roughly it's about 100 bundles of wood per week. So we've got 40,000 cook stoves in operation. So every week we're saving 80,000 bundles of wood. It's a much easier way of visualizing it than the carbon carbon credits, but it all, when you you get all the figures, and what we did originally was we had a three-stone fire, and we got our baseline as to how much wood was basically used and how much carbon was consumed, and so that's our baseline. And now every year for our we're audited, and we do what we call a kitchen performance test, where we get we randomly select a large number. I think it's, I can't remember exactly how many it is, but about 300 and something households, and we, over a 3-day period, we actually go in and we weigh exactly how much wood they've used. So they have like 3 bundles of wood which are weighed. We explain it all to the householder. We weigh those bundles of wood, and then we come back the next day, the next day, the next day, and then weigh the bundles again. So you can see exactly how much has been used. And you're also getting the moisture content of each of the wood on a random basis. And then you can actually see how much wood has been used, basically. And so then you've got your baseline, and the difference is the carbon saving. And that is what produces our carbon credits, basically. And they're the ones that we're selling. But it's absolutely vital for our project. We've got about 100 people working on this project, and they're all local in the communities. And it means it's a way that we can fund them and fund our managers and coordinators to make this an ongoing project. And in theory, I would love to, if we can, raise enough money, I'd love to do more projects, and we're ready to do more projects in the adjoining district. So, so that's basically us and what we do. And I'm going to hand you back to Sue now.
Thanks very much, Geoffrey. It's fantastic work you're doing, and just shows that important work of social entrepreneurs working in the community with that sort of humility and helpfulness, and how the carbon market finance has helped. I think David has had a different experience, so it's another sector. There's some good questions coming in on the chat in terms of experiences people have had, Jacob and Jin. But we'll hear from David first about your experiences in climate neutral now and with the carbon market finance. And then we can have a wider conversation and talk about those questions. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much. And I feel privileged, because I got the best of both worlds. I'm part of Catalyst, and I'm part of the climate neutral now. Just wanted to say that for me, it's everything about people, as you know. When we are talking about the United Nations, as Miguel was saying, we all think about these big structures, these big corporations and how big umbrellas. But again, it's about people. I was lucky to find Miguel, because for me, United Nations is Miguel. And I've been having an amazing relationship with him. He's always open, he's always there, to answer, to be in touch. And that is actually perhaps something that we can learn as well. It's not just about umbrellas, it's about the people within. And if we get to know the right people, then we got a chance, to do more and more things. So anyway, having said that, is my experience is also, I wanted to share with the group, the family here in Catalyst, that is helping me as well. They got an amazing tools, to help you to do that, just measuring, reducing, and compensating somehow. Because sometimes we want to do things, but we don't know where or how to start. So they got those tools for you, to use them and see, okay, what can I do now? And you can actually sort of build up a framework for your own organization, to take the right measures and get them, and somehow some action within this transition. Because again, yes, this is just compensating, it's just a transition, So I think those are really good tools that we can all use. My experience to onboard within climate neutral now it's been really great, very supportive as well to get in. You gotta sort of, you share some of the values they have. You gotta sign up a sort of pledge in which you sort of make a commitment, to make that, to measure and to make sure that you are sort of becoming more efficient and compensating. And in the end, it's also an alternative way to support other good work that for many people, social entrepreneurs that are all over, and helping, as Miguel said, projects that are in developing countries. And they got a list of a lot of projects, amazing people doing good work. So yes, it's an alternative channel. But I also want to share with you that we got the chance to have a sort of meeting together before the lockdown, actually. Well, the name was the Future Vision, in a way that, within Climate Neutral now, more than 300 organizations all over the world. Many of them are social entrepreneurs, like many of the people here in Catalyst. And we got together, to do a sort of brainstorming sessions, because actually they wanted to improve the relationship between public and private. And this is actually something that Catalyst, we want to learn as well, how to strengthen these relationships, these public and private relationships. And it was amazing. It was plenty of inspiring people like Geoff, with amazing stories and projects all over the world. We got together, we got the chance to share our stories, and then making this brainstorming to improve that relationship between, the United Nations Climate Neutral Now and the future of that initiative, together with the social entrepreneurs. So I think that is also a very good lesson that we can share here within this group. Actually, there is a report that Miguel issued, the department issued for all of the members, with some of the recommendations based on those in that meeting and those brainstormings. So that is actually something that is good actually to be shared here. And finally, just to say that for me, it's been an amazing journey as well, being part of the Climate Neutral Now. I'm quite happy, and I'll be more than happy to help anyone within Catalyst, to become a member of Climate Neutral Now. And for sure, Miguel is, as I said, is an amazing person, willing to help. So any question, you have the right guy. We do have the right guy. So thank you. Back to Sue again.
Thanks, David. Can I just, so you've definitely, the Climate Neutral Now sounds like a great network. So can I just clarify between you and Miguel, it's something you join? Is it for people who join, it's because they want to buy the carbon credits to support work of people like Geoffrey, or do you join does Geoffrey join? Just to clarify, who can join?
So the participants, the signatories to the pledge that David was mentioning, the participants, they join by committing to support climate action through measure, reduce, offset, right? And in the offset step, there's the support for Geoffrey and the types of projects that Geoffrey has. So the members are not Geoffrey. Our members bring support to projects like Geoffrey's. Okay,
perfect. So we had some good discussion in the chat room, so maybe we can sort of open up the conversation. Jacob said that he has had some experience with gold standard carbon credits, and he has some questions around that. So Jacob, do you want to ask Miguel and see if he can help you problem solve that?
Yeah, just to give you a bit of background, the company is a safe drinking water company, and the credits that we generate is from not using firewood to boil water. Yep, and it's been certified by the Gold Standards organization. So it's an annual audit that's been done. We did manage to sell some amount of credits forward, where we got money in advance, used it to build out more water kiosks, committed the credits from that for 7 years. But we also have other villages that generate credits. And our problem has been actually finding the right network to sell these credits on the voluntary market. And we did get into conversations with some big corporates that we thought would be interested in buying credits. And because we generate a small amount of credits, 40 to 50,000 tons per year currently. It makes a big difference to our business because it helps support the business. But many of the people were asking for, for example, we were in a conversation with Danone Communities, and they said they needed 230,000 carbon credits a year, and anything less than that wouldn't work for them. And they couldn't be dealing with small people, So I was just wondering, and it looks like the Climate Neutral Now could be a platform for aggregating these certified credits and then selling it. I'm just wondering. So that's a problem that we have. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, I think this methodology on water purification actually made it from the gold standard, from the voluntary market into the CDM. It started in the voluntary market, and then there was also methodology for the CDM. So it's a nice one. The problem that you're describing, I think, is more generic. It's not only about small projects or small scale projects that generate relatively small amounts of carbon credits, but it's a generic problem in the carbon market. There is a lack of demand in general terms because of, I would say, lack of ambition from national governments and others in using this tool for climate action, right? Under the Paris Agreement, the only article that has not been fully agreed upon yet is Article 6, which is the one that deals with carbon markets precisely, among other mechanisms. So right now there is this lack of demand that may be causing issues not only for use with the small projects, but also for others. I don't have an easy solution. The only thing to say is one of the immediate sectors where you could look at is airlines. Just because CORSIA is coming into force soon, at least the voluntary part of CORSIA, and many airlines have been active on trying to already identify sources of credits, and the gold standard, of course, is one of the accepted ones. In terms of Climate Neutral Now helping pool credits from projects, we indeed do that. The challenge we have right now is we can only do it for CDM because it's the mandate that we have. We support the Kyoto Protocol and the Kyoto Protocol mechanisms. Voluntary market mechanisms is beyond that. So we don't have information about the projects. We don't have the contacts, nothing, only for CDM. But maybe in the future, it's something that we could look at.
Thank you.
So I understand that there will be some changes coming to the carbon market finance once this is agreed. Is it likely, when will these changes come through, do you think, Miguel?
Mm-hmm. So there are two things I think Jacob is aware, and also the colleague that was responding to Jacob, Jean. And there are two main things that are coming into perspective. One is CORSIA, or the Carbon Offset and Reduction. I forgot now the full acronym, the name of the full acronym. The mechanism, the tool that the international aviation industry has put in place to address emissions from that industry. They are going to be compensating for emissions that go above 2020-2021 baseline. Now, because of COVID 2020, nobody knew most flights would be grounded. So I'm expecting that there will be some second thoughts about that baseline. But in any case, they were supposed to take this baseline and start compensating any growth above the baseline. Still, that means a significant demand for carbon credits. So that is supposed to be entering into force next year. Again, let's see if something changes because of the pandemic, but next year as an initial voluntary phase to test it out. And then the second, yep,
oh,
sorry.
Go on. Oh, there's another one, good, go on.
Yes, the other one is Article 6 of the Paris Agreement that I just mentioned. It's the only one that is pending final agreement by governments. It's always difficult, the agreement on carbon markets, because it's a, let's say it's a bargaining chip between the different parts. But the idea is, once it's agreed, hopefully next year in Glasgow, it could be operationalized quite quickly and generate demand also from national governments, which right now is very, very small.
So Geoffrey's project is obviously large enough. It sounds as if Geoffrey found a carbon consultant who, as Jin mentioned, you need a carbon consultant, and that was Sigma Global. So do you have a list of, are you able to provide us with a list of sort of resources, like the methodology, where are the methodologies, where are the consultants that can help you, that we can circulate to the group afterwards, Miguel?
In terms of carbon or consultants for the carbon markets, we do not have a comprehensive list, but we can definitely provide pointers. For example, IETA, the International Emissions Trading Association. This is the sectoral organization for the industry. So you can have a look at their website, and they bring together many of the players in this area. So this is IETA. And then on the rules and the methodologies, the procedures, the tools that you can use for these projects, everything about the CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism, which is one of the standards that you can use, is available online. Everything is public. It's again, it's developed under the Kyoto Protocol of the UNCCC, so it's completely open to anyone. Okay, we can also share the links for those that are not familiar. The pages are not great, and the information can be very technical. So have some patience. Okay.
And you mentioned that people would need to spend some time and money, which is something we're all short of. So how much time and how much money? And if you get one of these consultants, it sounds like Geoffrey found this consultant from Sigma Global, and then he kind of sorted it all out for Geoffrey, and Geoffrey just gets on with his job. Is that a typical scenario?
It's quite normal, yes. It's usually a three-part project where you have the actual project operator like Geoffrey, the carbon expert or the carbon market expert that can help you with that element of the project, and then our side or gold standard or whoever you use for certification also in the equation. Now the investment depends on the size of the project. Obviously, the bigger the project, the bigger the investment. Also, probably the smallest the value per ton of carbon that you're going to generate or that you're going to avoid. One solution to keep in mind, or one potential solution, is what we call programs of activities within the CDM. When you have many small projects that probably developing all of them individually wouldn't make sense because it's prohibited cost-wise, you can bundle them together. You can put them together under one bigger project, and then the cost, the overall cost is reduced. So this is one option. And now one last comment, Sue, because it's important probably for the ones that are not so familiar with the CDM. The CDM, in principle, ends this year, 2020. For 2021 onwards, parties, national governments, still have to tell us what they want the CDM to, what they want to do with the CDM. We need an active decision on that from their side next year. So for now, the CDM is a good source of methodologies and tools and processes, to have a look. But if I was a project developer getting started right now, I would probably think twice before going the CDM route, because we don't know what's going to happen from next year. For the time being very honest, the safest bet could be to look at voluntary standards, gold standard, verified carbon standard for ERRA, Plan Vivo, or others. And hopefully next year we have a decision by national governments, and we know what's happening with the CDM and with the new carbon market mechanisms that the Paris Agreement foresees.
That's good advice, Miguel. Thank you. So if someone has a project idea, is the best thing to do to just go straight to IETA, the consultants who basically can tell you whether you've got a project that can get funded or not, and make it work for you?
In principle, yes, exactly. Check with an expert to see what the feasibility is. Yeah.
And I guess they will also know about the methodology. So that seems like the easiest thing to do.
Definitely. They are experts in the topic. They know the methodologies both within the CDM and the voluntary standards. They know how the finance works. They know who the buyers are. They have all the right information to help with that.
And Jacob is saying in the chat that he used donor grants to help to get the certification, which he's had to pay back. So it's a returnable grant. I'm just wondering if, Jin, if you wanted to come in and share your experiences with the carbon market finance, or if there's any questions or points you wanted to raise with the group. You're still there. You've made some good comments on the chat there. Jin, are you able to talk to us about your Singapore project? Don't think so. Oh yes, hello. Jin, are you able to tell us about your Singapore project or anything you want to share about using carbon market finance? He's hanging, he says, hang on. He'll come on in a few minutes, yeah. So you want to tell us a bit more about the Momentum for Change Awards while we're waiting for Jin to come in?
Sure.
It's always good to get an award, but what's the deadline and what's involved?
Yes, so Momentum for Change, as I said, is open to any organization around the world. There are, until now, that may change in the near future, the exact process, but right now there are several pillars or topics under which you can apply. Climate neutral now is one. You also have finance for development, women for results, and they change a little bit year on year, the specific topics. So if you have a project that matches the description of that topic, of that pillar, that is replicable, scalable, and innovative, those are the key three criteria: replicable, scalable, and innovative, you can apply. I think someone shared the link to the website, and the application goes through that website. For this year, it closed in April, if I'm not mistaken. We'll see what happens because of COVID, everything has changed. It may be that it's reopened, delayed, I don't know. But for this year, it has been closed in April. We need to wait and see what happens. Usually, under normal circumstances, winners will be selected around August. There is an external panel external to the UNFCCC Secretariat of experts on the different topics that assess the projects and select usually 3 winners per category. And the winners or are brought to the COP, the Conference of the Parties, the UNFCCC big meeting, to receive the award. And there is also communication pieces done around the project. The goal being to support you to try to get additional finance, additional support.
So you're saying that the awards closed, but then the time of the COP has moved. So is it possible that the awards will reopen?
Exactly. It's one of the options. The advisory board has to make a decision about that. Either they reopen, or we have an award ceremony that is virtual this year, or yeah, we have to wait and see what happens.
Well, we'll circulate that along with the IETA and the methodologies. So Jin, thanks for joining us. Are you able to tell us a little bit, or you have any questions or comments about the carbon market finance in your experiences? Oh, you're still muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry about that, but it's like midnight plus over here. Yes, actually, we were the first to get into it. I was very lucky to get a consultant friend who did it at pretty much like half the market price. All right. At that time, early stages, we didn't get any grants or anything at all. In fact, a lot of people actually didn't know. So there was a lot of lack of knowledge and exposure. And Miguel explained something about additionality, and that's actually very, very important. A lot of people misunderstood that it was that, you know, CDM is, oh yeah, there's a pot of money there, but additionality is so misunderstood. But of course, the CDM is actually quite a difficult road. I consider it as a long journey, you know, a winding road, actually, not a highway. And the fact is, again, we had a few stumbles, quite a few. And in fact, because the methodologies keep evolving, I won't say changing. So whenever it's a certain, you know, your project gets reviewed again and it goes back to square one because somebody had some comments on it, and you more or less go back to the end of the queue. And most consultants would have to be charging extra, you know. So if your project is too small, then it's not going to be worthwhile. We were certified for 15,000 CERs, considered quite a small project, but we were quite fortunate that I think it was a Japanese company actually bought it up anyway. So we had a lot of problems, quite frankly. And one is selling, the other one, and the other was generation, or certified generation. All right, and this is actually a journey that took more months than we expected, actually. So, but I think the main thing is actually finding the right consultant. In one sense, you know, I knew him, so I trusted him, so to speak, and he trusted that I would try to get through the project. I actually would think that it is worthwhile, but the problem now is that you're saying the CDM is going to end next year, right? So really, it's no point even starting it now, because then by the time you get up for it and submit for evaluation, well, it'll be like 2021. And I think that then you're faced with the 7-year limit. So it becomes neither here nor there, and I can see why investors would not go forward with it. In which case, then the other one would be, for example, the volunteer market to sell VERs rather than CRs. So, and volunteer emissions generate less. You know, they'll pay much less on that, which means that you need an even bigger project to get the same amount of money. So and it's very, very complicated. So, you know, I'm not an expert in it. All I know is complicated. It doesn't get easy. I'm also quite interested in this because I'm actually having another project here, and and we actually have a small-scale decentralized biomass power plant. It's a very small project, but instead of having one big power station, whether it's going to be 500 or 1,000 megawatts, right? We have developed this technology that you make 4.5 kilowatts, and the machine is only about 0.9 meters wide and less than 2 meters width. But it has no batteries, it has no electronics, it doesn't use diesel, so it would offset a lot of carbon from the reduction in diesel. So we use our technology, which has 2 patents granted. All right, it's an Australian technology where we keep a very low profile. The problem is that a lot of people don't want to go into managing many of these little projects everywhere. And again, as Miguel mentioned, we need to look at a programmatic project. And programmatic is that we are an engineering company. So although I know about the carbon market, I'm not going to devote my time because it's really more than, it's a full-time job, you know, to handle that. And because the rules keep evolving, so it's going to be more than a full-time job. If you have not done it before, then just stand back and let somebody do it with a good track record.
That's a great intervention, and I think what you said there, Jin, is, and I'm sorry to interject there, but we're just coming to the end of this webinar now.
Oh, okay.
But it sounds like you and Jacob have sort of given Miguel some food for thought, but I know he knows about these problems. But what we need is when the governments decide on the next process and system in Article 6, it needs to work for these projects which are not big scale, or to make sure that projects can be amalgamated and to reduce the barriers to entry for people. So I think Miguel's heard that and is going to share some resources as well to help. And David's offered that he can be a sounding board as well, should anyone wish to take the floor. So has Miguel, actually. Should anyone wish to step into explore this with the proviso, don't go for CDM, go for the voluntary market, although as you say, it pays less. So I think we've got some ways forward for anyone that joined the call, hopefully. If you have any other questions, just thinking, Yvonne, how can people, if we email you, you can reply to the email when we send you the recording and any resources. You can always reply to that email, and then we can put you in touch with Miguel. Is that right, Yvonne?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
And one clarification before we close, just very quickly. The CDM is not that it's ending next year, is that we need a decision from governments what they want to do with it from next year. That's it. Okay. They may decide that it continues, that it doesn't, but it's up to them to decide. We don't know yet.
Okay, just a quick one, Miguel. I think it's very important that we focus on small projects, because small projects are easier to launch off. And quite frankly, if you meet big bankers and financials, they say, don't wake me up unless it's $50 million project. And how many $50 million projects are there? Obviously you can get hundreds and thousands of projects under 1, 2, 3 million. But quite frankly, 50 million is that what bankers are paid for.
Yeah, it's a very good point. So may I ask, thank you all for attending this webinar, and may I ask for a very brief, any closing thoughts, Geoffrey or David, and then Miguel, perhaps you can close us out.
Yes, so it's been very interesting, and I think from my point of view, I think it's a great scheme, and hopefully we'll be doing it for many more years. One thing I'm hoping is that the price of carbon offsets will go up. One of the problems with our project is because it's quite a costly project to keep going, because we're dealing with lots of people. We've got, as I say, we've got about 100 staff. We've got about 40,000 households that we have to go and visit. So we need to make sure that we get the right sort of money to come in. So hopefully carbon offset prices will go up. So, but thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Geoff. Your work is great. And David, do you have any closing remarks?
I think it's been great, and again, thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Miguel, and thank you everybody to be here. Again, as I'm part of both. I got the best of both worlds, as I said in the beginning. Whatever question or anything you may need, I'm also part of the family, so I'm open and to answer any doubt or any question that you may have as well. Okay.
Okay. We'll share your. Is it okay to share your contacts?
Yeah, sure.
On the resources. Okay. Thanks, David, and thanks for bringing us all together to create this event. And finally, Miguel, over to you. I've learned a lot from all of you. It's been really interesting. Miguel.
Thank you so much for the invitation again. And maybe the final message is, yes, the carbon markets or the carbon market mechanisms are complex. They can be complex. You need to really put effort into them. But as Geoffrey said, very important point, with the right price, then everything is possible. So hopefully we'll see with the increased call for climate action, or the call for increased climate action, that the prices go up. And then all the other barriers can be dealt with, right? Even if it's complicated mechanisms. From our side, just to tell you that don't get discouraged. Keep your eye on how the markets evolve, what decisions are made next year on the Paris Agreement, and hopefully after that we can start developing more new projects or supporting better the ones that already exist.
Thank you. Thanks, Miguel. Thanks, everybody. And we'll follow up with an email with the recording and the resources. And we wish you every success with your projects in the future.